The envelope arrived without a return address. Kade Moreau didn't open it immediately. He set it on the marble counter of his penthouse kitchen, poured himself 2 fingers of Macallan, and stared at the rain streaking down the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lower Manhattan. The whiskey burned going down. The envelope remained sealed. Inside was a single photograph. Zire, pregnant, standing outside a clinic in Brooklyn he didn't know existed. The glass slipped from Cade's hand. Amber liquid spread across white marble like blood across snow. He didn't move to clean it. His phone buzzed 3 times. He ignored it. The photograph trembled between his fingers, not from the image itself, but from the red circle drawn around Zaire's stomach in permanent marker. Someone knew, someone had been watching. Someone wanted Cade to understand that this secret no longer belonged to him. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Cade had ended 12 operations across 4 states in the past 6 months. He dismantled trafficking rings that moved through New Jersey, Philadelphia, and Baltimore like ghosts. He burned down warehouses, erased financial records, and made men disappear without ever raising his voice. None of that prepared him for this moment. None of that mattered now. Because the one thing he'd tried to protect was already compromised. He turned the photograph over. 3 words were written on the back in handwriting he didn't recognize. They already know. Cade's chest tightened. His scent spiked, sharp, acidic, the kind that made omegas flinch and alphas step back. But Zire wasn't here to smell it. Zire hadn't been here in 43 days. Not since Cade stopped answering his calls. Not since Cade changed the penthouse security codes and rerouted all messages to an assistant who didn't exist. The phone buzzed again. This time, Cade looked. Unknown number, a text message. No words, just coordinates. He recognized the location immediately. A warehouse in Red Hook, Cauldron territory. Cade crushed the phone in his fist. Plastic cracked. The screen went dark. He didn't need it anymore. He already knew what this was. Bait, leverage, a move designed to force him into the open. And it would work, because the alternative was unthinkable. Zire was out there, alone, carrying a child Cade had never acknowledged, carrying proof of a bond Cade had spent 2 months pretending didn't exist. The worst part wasn't the fear. It wasn't even the rage building in his throat like steam in a closed valve. The worst part was this. Cade had known something like this was coming. He'd seen the pattern forming weeks ago, the missed check-ins from his network, the encrypted messages that stopped arriving, the sudden silence from contacts in Boston and Detroit who never went quiet. He told himself it was coincidence. He told himself he had time. He'd been wrong. And now someone else had erased the choice entirely. Zaire Hale learned to stop asking questions 3 years ago. Back then, he'd worked at a coffee shop in Cambridge, the kind with exposed brick and overpriced pastries where college students pretended to study. He made lattes. He kept his head down. He survived by being forgettable. That was before Cade walked in wearing a watch worth more than Zaire's rent and ordered black coffee like it was a test. Zaire passed. Cade came back the next day, and the day after that, never said much, always left a $50 bill for a $4 drink. Zire didn't ask why. In his experience, alphas who overpaid either wanted something or felt guilty about wanting it. Either way, questions only made things worse. But Cade was different. He didn't stare, didn't crowd Zaire's space, didn't ask invasive questions about heat cycles or pack status. He just existed, steady, quiet, safe in a way Zaire had stopped believing was real. It took 6 weeks before they had an actual conversation. It took 3 months before Cade invited him to dinner. It took 4 before Zaire realized the man he was falling for controlled half the criminal infrastructure on the East Coast. By then, it was too late to walk away. Zaire had grown up in foster care in Philadelphia. No pack, no alpha protection, no illusions about how the world worked. Omegas without connections disappeared all the time. The system called it trafficking. Zaire called it Tuesday. He'd watched it happen to others, kids he'd shared bedrooms with, people he'd trusted, gone overnight, replaced by new faces who learned the same lessons too late. So when Cade appeared in his life like an answer to a prayer Zaire had stopped praying, he didn't question it. He didn't ask what Cade did for a living. He didn't push when Cade left in the middle of the night and came back smelling like gunpowder and concrete dust. He just held on. The pregnancy wasn't planned. Zaire found out alone in a gas station bathroom off Route 95. 2 pink lines. His hands shook so hard he dropped the test in the sink. He stared at it for 20 minutes, waiting for the lines to disappear, waiting for his biology to make sense in a world that had never made space for him. They didn't disappear. Cade had been in Chicago when it happened, some business deal that required his physical presence. Zaire didn't call him. He didn't know how to say the words out loud. Instead, he went home to the apartment Cade had quietly paid for, never in his own name, always through shell companies. Zaire pretended not to notice, and waited. Cade returned 4 days later. That was the night everything changed. Zaire tried to tell him over dinner. Cade had brought takeout from the Italian place in Brooklyn they both liked. They sat at the kitchen table, the one Cade had built himself because Zaire mentioned once that he'd always wanted something solid, and Zaire opened his mouth to speak. The words wouldn't come. Cade looked at him, really looked, the way he always did, like Zaire was the only thing in the room that mattered, and Zaire felt the truth rise in his throat like bile. I'm pregnant. Cade went completely still, not surprised, not shocked, just absent, like someone had reached inside his chest and turned off a switch. Okay, he said. That was all. The next morning, Cade was gone. No note, no explanation, just absence where presence used to be. Zaire told himself it was temporary, work emergency, alpha instincts kicking in, something rational and fixable. A week passed, then 2. Cade's texts became shorter, his calls stopped entirely, the apartment felt bigger, emptier, like a space designed for someone who no longer existed. Zaire started noticing things. The security cameras that had appeared on his building's entrance, the black SUV that idled across the street every Tuesday and Thursday, the medical bills that showed up paid in full before Zaire even received them. Cade was still protecting him. He just wasn't doing it in person. That realization hurt worse than abandonment, because it meant Cade still cared. It meant this wasn't rejection, it was strategy, and Zaire had no idea what war he'd stumbled into. Everyone assumed it would keep working, and no one had a backup. Kade Moreau had killed 17 men in his life. None of them haunted him the way this decision did. He stood in the executive office of a building he technically didn't own. Paperwork said it belonged to a shipping company, but the top 3 floors answered only to him. Outside, tugboats moved through the East River like they had somewhere to be. Inside, Cade faced a problem money couldn't solve. The lawyer sitting across from him was named Dominique Chen. She specialized in cases that never went to trial. Her retainer cost more than most people made in a year. She didn't flinch when Cade explained the situation. You can't protect him publicly, she said. The moment anyone connects the Omega to you, the child becomes a target. I know. You can't claim the child legally, not without creating a paper trail. I know. You can't even be seen together. Surveillance is everywhere, facial recognition, license plate readers, cell tower pings. Cade's jaw tightened. I know. Dominique folded her hands. Her nails were painted deep red. She wore a Cartier bracelet Cade had watched her buy with money earned from keeping monsters out of prison. She was very good at her job. That was the problem. Then you understand, she said quietly, that every solution requires his cooperation, and he won't cooperate unless you tell him the truth. I can't. Why not? Cade looked at her, because the truth will get him killed faster than the lie. That was the limit, the boundary Cade couldn't overpower, not with money, not with violence, not with every connection he'd built over 15 years of controlling territory from Boston to Washington, D.C. The child was the variable the system couldn't absorb. Cade had run the scenarios, all of them. Hire private security, too visible. Move Zaire out of state, too traceable. Create a false identity, too fragile. Every option led to the same outcome, exposure. And exposure meant Cauldron's people would know. Cauldron's people would act. And Cade would be forced to choose between saving Zire and saving the network that kept hundreds of other Omegas alive. It wasn't a choice, it was a trap. Dominique leaned back in her chair. There's another option. Cade waited. Make him believe you don't want him. Make the separation look like rejection instead of protection. Let him think you're a coward. Let him think you're ashamed. She paused. Let him hate you. The words landed like bullets. Cade's sense spiked. Dominique didn't react. She'd been around dangerous alphas long enough to know when one was about to break. If he hates you, she continued, he stops looking for you. He stops trying to contact you. He becomes invisible by choice instead of force. Her voice softened. It's not permanent, once the threat is neutralized. It's how long? 6 months, maybe a year. Cade stood, walked to the window, pressed his palm against the glass. It was cold, everything was cold. "He's 3 months along," Cade said. "He'll give birth before the year is up. Then you'll miss it." The truth sat between them like a third person in the room. Cade had faced down syndicates. He'd negotiated with people who didn't believe in negotiation. He'd walked into rooms knowing he might not walk out and done it anyway, because the alternative was worse. But this required something else. This required becoming the villain in Zaire's story, becoming the alpha who abandoned his omega during the most vulnerable time in his life, becoming exactly the kind of man Cade had spent years destroying. "He'll never forgive me," Cade said. Dominique stood, smoothed her skirt, picked up her briefcase. "Probably not, but he'll be alive to hate you." She left. Cade stayed at the window, watched the river, watched the city pretend it wasn't built on violence and compromise. His phone buzzed. Another message from Zaire. He didn't read it. He'd stopped reading them 2 weeks ago. Each one was a small death. Each one made it harder to keep going. But he did keep going. Because the alternative was watching Zaire's name show up on a coroner's report. Because the alternative was finding out too late that love wasn't enough. Because Cade had learned a long time ago that the right choice and the kind choice were rarely the same thing. Every known solution failed for the same reason. The avoidance became a routine. Cade stopped going to places Zaire might be. He rerouted his schedule, changed his gym, switched dry cleaners. He moved through the city like a ghost, avoiding its own haunting. But ghosts left traces. Zaire's apartment, the one Cade still paid for through accounts Zaire couldn't trace, received upgrades, new locks, reinforced windows, a security system connected to a monitoring company that reported directly to Cade's second-in-command. Medical bills vanished before Zaire saw them. Grocery deliveries appeared on Tuesdays. A monthly stipend hit a bank account Zaire didn't remember opening. Cade told himself this was enough, that protection from a distance counted, that Zaire was safer this way. The lie tasted like ash. He sat in a surveillance van parked 3 blocks from Zaire's building, watching grainy footage on a laptop screen. Zaire left for a doctor's appointment at 9:15. He wore the sweater Cade had bought him last winter, oversized, grey, soft enough to sleep in. His hand rested on his stomach. The bump was visible now, undeniable. Cade's throat closed. The doctor's office was clean, reputable. Cade had vetted every staff member personally. He'd paid extra for privacy. He'd ensured Zaire's records were locked behind encryption that would take a government agency weeks to crack. But privacy had limits. Cade's phone rang. He answered without looking at the screen. "We have a problem," said Terence, his head of security. Former military, didn't panic, didn't exaggerate. "Talk." Cauldron's people made contact. They know about the Omega. Cade's blood went ice cold. How? Clinic employee sold the information for 10,000 cash. Where's the employee now? Handled. Cade closed his eyes. What do they want? Nothing yet, but they're watching, same as us. That was the nightmare, not violence, not kidnapping, just watching, waiting, building leverage. Cauldron didn't make moves, he manufactured inevitability. "Increase security," Cade said. "I want eyes on him 24 hours, no gaps." "Already done, but boss," Terence hesitated. "He's going to notice, he's not stupid." Cade knew Zaire was observant, careful, survival instincts honed by years of navigating a world that didn't protect people like him. He'd see the pattern, the shadows that followed him, the coincidences that stopped being coincidental. And he'd come looking for answers. "Let me know if he moves," Cade said. He ended the call, stared at the laptop screen. Zaire was leaving the clinic now, walking toward the subway. His steps were slower than before. Tired, he stopped once, hand pressed to his lower back, face tight with pain. Cade's hands curled into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to go there, to close the distance, to put his hand where Zaire's hand was and carry some of the weight. He didn't move. Because love was the liability, because presence was the danger, because Cade had made a choice that cost him everything and saved the only thing that mattered. But the cost kept rising. His inner circle started asking questions, allies who depended on his reputation, associates who expected loyalty and visibility. They noticed his absence from meetings, his distraction during negotiations, the way he avoided certain neighborhoods like they were contaminated. Rumors started, quiet ones. the kind that spread through whispered conversations and encrypted messages. Kade Moreau is losing his edge. Something happened, someone got to him. He's weak. Weakness in his world was a death sentence. Not for him, for everyone who relied on him, for the network that moved Omegas out of bad situations before those situations turned fatal, for the safe houses in Newark and Richmond that existed because Cade's reputation kept predators at bay. If he fell, they fell. So he doubled down, took meetings he didn't care about, closed deals that didn't matter, made appearances at places designed to prove he was still functional, still dangerous, still the alpha who didn't flinch. Inside, he was breaking. Continuing meant accepting years of visible failure. The first attempt happened on a Thursday. Zire was walking home from the bodega 3 blocks from his apartment. He'd bought orange juice and crackers, the only things that didn't make him nauseous anymore. The sun was setting. The streetlights flickered on in sequence like dominoes falling. He didn't notice the car until it slowed beside him. Black sedan, tinted windows, New York plates. It idled at the curb while Zire walked past. He felt it watching, felt the weight of attention like heat on the back of his neck. He walked faster. The car followed. Zaire's heart kicked into overdrive. He turned down a side street, narrower, more witnesses, closer to home. The car turned too. He could see his building now, 50 feet, 40, 30. The car accelerated. Zaire ran. He hit the building entrance at full speed, fumbled with his keys, dropped them, grabbed them, shoved the key into the lock with shaking hands. The car stopped directly behind him. A door opened. Zaire got inside, slammed the door, ran for the elevator. Behind him, someone tested the entrance door. It held. The new locks Cade had installed, the ones Zaire thought were just building upgrades, kept it closed. Zaire made it to his apartment, locked 3 deadbolts, slid down the door onto the floor, his pulse hammered in his ears, his hands pressed against his stomach, protective, instinctive, useless. The baby kicked. For the first time since Cade left, Zaire understood. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about something bigger, something dangerous enough to make an alpha like Cade disappear without explanation. Someone powerful now knew the child existed. The hospital room smelled like bleach and fear. Zaire woke to fluorescent lights and the steady beep of machines he didn't remember being connected to. His arm burned where an IV punctured skin. His throat felt like sandpaper. He tried to sit up. Pain shot through his abdomen, sharp, immediate, wrong. A nurse appeared. She wore purple scrubs and had kind eyes that didn't match the tension in her jaw. "Don't move," she said. "You're okay. The baby's okay." Zaire's hand flew to his stomach, still round, still there. His heart rate spiked. The monitor beside him screamed in response. "What happened?" The nurse adjusted his IV. Checked the monitors, avoided his eyes. "You collapsed outside your building. Dehydration, stress, someone called an ambulance." That wasn't the whole story. Zaire could see it in the way she kept glancing at the door, in the way her hands moved too quickly, in the way she said someone like the word was a placeholder for a truth she couldn't speak. "Who brought me here?" "I don't know, they didn't stay." Lie, clean, practiced, the kind nurses told when lawyers or police or people with money told them to. Zaire's phone sat on the table beside him. 37 missed calls, all from blocked numbers. 3 text messages from contacts he didn't recognize. He opened the first one. "You were followed, we intervened, stay inside." The second message was an address, a clinic in Queens, instructions to transfer his medical records there immediately. The third message was a bank statement. His account, the one he barely used, now had $60,000 in it. Zaire's hands shook. He knew this pattern. He'd seen it before. Protection disguised as coincidence. Money appearing when he needed it most. Obstacles removed before he knew they existed. Cade. Still watching, still controlling, still absent. The nurse left. Zaire stared at the ceiling, counted the tiles. 36. He tried to make sense of the math. Tried to understand how someone could care enough to save his life but not enough to show his face. The door opened again, not the nurse this time. A man in a suit, expensive, tailored. He carried a briefcase that probably cost more than Zaire's rent. He didn't introduce himself, didn't ask permission, just walked in and sat down like he owned the room. "My name is Langston," he said. "I work for someone who wants to ensure your safety." Zaire's stomach twisted. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Langston opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder, set it on Zaire's lap. These are the people who tried to take you yesterday. This is what they planned to do with you. This is why they failed. Zaire didn't open the folder. Couldn't. His hands wouldn't move. You're being used as leverage, Langston continued. Not because of who you are, because of who you're connected to. He leaned forward. And that connection is putting you in more danger every day you remain visible. Then tell him to come talk to me himself. Langston's expression didn't change. He can't. If he's seen with you, the people watching will escalate. They'll move faster than we can protect you. So what am I supposed to do? Hide forever? For now, yes. Zaire laughed. It came out bitter, broken. He sent you to tell me to disappear. He sent me to give you options. Langston stood, straightened his tie. There's a place upstate, private, secure, medical staff on site. You'd be safe there until after the birth. And then what? Then we reassess. The word we hung in the air like smoke. Zaire wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to demand answers from a man who clearly didn't have permission to give them. Instead, he said, "Get out." Langston nodded, left the folder, left the room, left Zaire alone with choices that weren't really choices at all. At this point, success would no longer look like success. 2 days later, Zaire was released. He went back to his apartment, found groceries in his fridge he didn't buy, found new clothes in his closet, maternity wear, expensive, tags still attached, found a phone on his kitchen counter with one number programmed into it. He threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. That night, someone tried to break in. Zaire heard them testing the locks at 2 in the morning, heard the scrape of metal on metal, heard voices, low, urgent, frustrated. The new security system Cade had installed started shrieking. Lights flooded the hallway. The voices stopped. By the time building security arrived, whoever it was had vanished. Zaire sat on his bedroom floor, knees pulled to his chest, hand over his stomach, understanding finally settling in his bones like cold water. Cade wasn't avoiding him because he didn't care. Cade was avoiding him because caring made everything worse. Rain hammered against the penthouse windows. Zaire stood in the center of Cade's living room, uninvited, unannounced, soaked to the bone. He'd bypassed building security using a key card he shouldn't have had, walked past cameras that should have stopped him, took an elevator that required biometric access he definitely didn't possess. But he'd gotten in. Because Cade had let him. The penthouse was dark except for the city lights bleeding through floor-to-ceiling glass. Zaire could see his own reflection, distorted, unfamiliar. His sweater clung to his body. His hair dripped onto hardwood floors that probably cost more than he'd earn in a lifetime. His stomach was unmistakable now. Round, heavy, proof of something Cade had spent months pretending didn't exist. "I know you're here," Zaire said. Silence answered. Then movement, a shadow detaching from shadows. Cade emerged from the hallway wearing a white button-down shirt rolled to his elbows. No jacket, no shoes, hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked wrecked, exhausted, like a man barely holding himself together. He stopped 10 feet away, kept the distance, didn't cross it. "You shouldn't be here," Cade said. His voice was rough, raw, like he'd forgotten how to use it. "Why do you keep avoiding me?" Zaire asked. The question hung between them, heavy, loaded, months of silence condensed into 7 words. Cade's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists at his sides. His sense spiked, something sharp and desperate that made Zaire's chest ache. "You need to leave." "No," Zaire stepped forward. Cade stepped back. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what I did wrong." "You didn't." Cade stopped, shook his head, turned away. "This isn't about you." "Then what is it about?" "I can't explain." "Try." Cade's shoulders rose and fell. His reflection in the window looked like a stranger. "You think I don't want this?" His voice cracked. "You think I don't?" He stopped again, pressed his palm against the glass. "I see your name on lists, Zaire, auction lists, target lists. I see prices next to your face like your livestock." Zaire's breath caught. "I imagined our child growing up hunted," Cade continued. "Imagined them being used the way you almost were. Imagined failing them the way I'm failing you right now." He turned then, finally, and the pain in his eyes was unmistakable. "I'm a monster to the world. I didn't want to be one to you." The words landed like punches. Zaire opened his mouth, closed it, felt tears he didn't want burning behind his eyes, his hand pressed against his stomach, protective, automatic, useless. "You look at me like I'm already gone," Zire whispered. "Because you should be." Cade's voice broke completely. "You should be somewhere safe, somewhere I can't reach, somewhere they can't use you to destroy everything." "Who's they?" "Everyone." Cade's hands shook. He shoved them in his pockets. "Anyone who wants leverage, anyone who knows what you mean to me, anyone who understands that I would burn this entire city down before letting them touch you." Lightning split the sky. Thunder followed, deep, bone rattling. The lights flickered. For a moment, the penthouse went completely dark. When they came back on, Zaire had crossed half the distance between them. "Then stop hiding," Zaire said. "Stop pretending you don't care. Stop making me feel like I'm the problem." "You're not the problem." Cade's voice was barely audible. "You're the only thing that's ever mattered, and that's exactly why I can't." He stopped, went completely still, stared at something past Zaire's shoulder with an expression that made Zaire's blood run cold. Zaire turned. Headlights, multiple, converging on the building entrance 20 floors below, black SUVs, moving with purpose, surrounding the building like wolves cornering prey. Cade's phone buzzed. He answered without breaking eye contact with the window. "Talk," he said. Whoever responded made Cade's expression go from worried to murderous in 3 seconds. He ended the call, looked at Zaire. "They know you're here." "It's who?" "Cauldron's people. They've been tracking you, waiting for you to lead them to me." Cade moved then fast, controlled like a soldier entering combat. He grabbed Zaire's hand, pulled him toward the hallway. "There's a safe room, reinforced. You're going there. Now." "What about you?" "I'm fixing this." "How?" Cade stopped, turned, cupped Zaire's face with both hands. His thumbs brushed over Zaire's cheekbones. His scent wrapped around them, protective, desperate, final. "By making sure they never touch you again." Then pain, sharp, immediate, low in Zaire's abdomen. He gasped, doubled over. Liquid warmth spread down his legs. His water had broken. Cade caught him before he fell. "No. No, 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 not now." But biology didn't negotiate. The baby was coming. And outside, Cauldron's people were closing in. The safe room was steel and concrete. No windows, one entrance. Reinforced door that could withstand gunfire. Medical supplies stacked against the wall, bandages, IV fluids, emergency equipment Cade had stockpiled for scenarios he prayed would never happen. This wasn't one of them. This was worse. Zaire lay on a makeshift bed, yoga mats covered with clean sheets. Contractions hit every 4 minutes. His face was pale, sweat soaked through his shirt. He gripped Cade's hand hard enough to bruise bone. "I can't do this here," Zaire gasped. "I need a hospital." "I know," Cade's voice stayed steady even though everything inside him was screaming. "But we can't move you, not yet." Outside the safe room, chaos had erupted. Cauldron's people had entered the building. Not violently, not loudly, just entered, like they had every right, like they owned the space. Cade's security was trying to intercept, trying to delay, trying to buy time they didn't have. Cade's phone vibrated continuously, updates coming faster than he could process. Lobby secured, elevators disabled. Stairwells blocked. They're using building maintenance access. ETA 3 minutes to your floor. Cade silenced the phone, focused on Zaire. "Breathe, in through your nose, out through your mouth." "I know how to breathe." Zaire's words dissolved into a scream as another contraction hit. Cade had faced armed standoffs, had negotiated with people who wanted him dead, had made impossible decisions while bullets flew past his head. None of that prepared him for this. For watching someone he loved suffer and being unable to stop it. For knowing that in 3 minutes, violence would reach this door. For understanding that every second spent here increased the danger to the only 2 people in the world who mattered. He made a decision. "Terrence," Cade said into his phone, "initiate Protocol 7. Silence on the other end, then boss, that's. "Do it now." Protocol 7 meant total shutdown. It meant sealing the building, trapping everyone inside, security, civilians, Cauldron's people. It meant turning the penthouse into a fortress and the lobby into a prison. It meant no one was leaving until this ended. "Done," Terrence said, "but we've got maybe 10 minutes before they breach the safe room door." Then make it 15. Cade ended the call, turned back to Zire. Another contraction. Zaire's nails dug into Cade's palm, blood welled where skin broke. Cade didn't flinch. I'm sorry, Zaire whispered. I shouldn't have come. Don't, Cade's voice was firm. Don't apologize, you did nothing wrong. But they found me because... They found you because I failed to protect you properly. Cade brushed sweat-soaked hair from Zaire's forehead. Because I thought distance was safety. Because I was wrong about everything except one thing. What? That you and this child are worth more than anything I've ever built. Zaire's eyes filled with tears. Cade. Gunfire, distant but unmistakable. The sound echoed through walls that were supposed to be soundproof. Terrence's voice crackled through a speaker mounted near the ceiling. Boss, they're not negotiating, they're clearing floors. Cade stood, moved to the weapons locker mounted in the corner, pulled out a Glock 19, checked the magazine, chambered around. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from a life Zaire had only glimpsed pieces of. What are you doing? Zaire asked. Making sure they don't reach this room. You can't, another contraction cut him off, this one longer, harder, his back arched off the bed. Cade returned, knelt beside him, pressed his forehead against Zaire's temple, let his scent flood the small space, protective, calming, desperate. I'm not leaving you, Cade said, but I'm not letting them in either. Outside, the gunfire grew louder, which created a new problem no one knew how to solve. The silence was worse than the gunfire. It meant someone had won, the question was who. Cade stood with his back against the safe room door, weapon drawn, every muscle coiled. Zaire's breathing filled the space, ragged, exhausted, punctuated by sounds Cade had never heard him make, sounds of effort, of pain, of a body doing something it was designed for but that still felt impossible. Footsteps approached, slow, deliberate, confident. Cade's finger moved to the trigger. Then a voice, familiar, boss, it's clear. Terrence. Cade exhaled, lowered the weapon, opened the door 6 inches. Terrence stood in the hallway, covered in dust and blood that probably wasn't his. Behind him, 3 bodies lay motionless. Security personnel worked quickly, removing evidence, sealing the area. Cauldron, Cade asked. In custody, FBI took him 20 minutes ago. Terrence's expression was grim. Anonymous tip. Someone sent them everything, financial records, trafficking routes, enough evidence to bury him for life. Cade's jaw tightened. Who? Don't know, but whoever it was had access to files we didn't know existed. That didn't make sense. Cade had spent months building cases against Cauldron, months trying to dismantle his operation without exposing the network. He'd been careful, patient, strategic. And someone had finished the job while Cade was trapped in this room. The building, Cade asked. Secure, Cauldron's people surrendered when they realized he wasn't coming back. Terrence glanced past Cade. House. A scream cut through the air. Not pain, something else, something raw and primal and final. Cade turned, ran back inside. Zaire's entire body was tense, face red, veins visible in his neck. His hand reached for Cade blindly. Cade caught it, held on. I'm here. I can't do this. You can, you are. Cade. Push. Zaire did. The sound that came out of him wasn't human. It was older than language, older than thought. It was every Omega who'd ever given birth alone and scared and fighting for survival. But Zaire wasn't alone. Cade was there, hands steady, voice calm, scent wrapping around them like armor. Again, one more. Zaire pushed. And then crying, high-pitched, angry, alive. Cade caught the baby, small, slippery, perfect. He'd held weapons, money, power, none of it compared to the weight in his hands right now. A daughter. Alpha scent, Omega features. Eyes that would probably be Zaire's color once they opened fully. She screamed like she was furious at the world for making her wait so long to exist. Cade wrapped her in the cleanest cloth he could find, placed her on Zaire's chest, watched Zaire's expression transform, exhaustion melting into wonder, fear dissolving into something Cade didn't have words for. She's perfect, Zaire whispered. Cade couldn't speak, his throat had closed completely. He just nodded, pressed his hand over Zaire's where it rested on their daughter's tiny back. For 3 minutes, the world was perfect. Then Terrence appeared in the doorway again, His expression was different now, confused, almost awed. "Boss, you need to see this." Cade didn't want to move, didn't want to break this moment, but Terrence's tone said it wasn't optional. He stood, followed Terrence into the hallway. Terrence handed him a phone. On the screen was a news article dated 2 hours ago. FBI dismantles largest Omega trafficking network in U.S. history. Anonymous evidence leads to 47 arrests across 6 states. Cade read, then read again. The article detailed operations Cauldron had run for years, but it also mentioned something else, a catalyst, a piece of evidence so damning it forced federal action. Medical records, proof of illegal breeding programs, documentation of omegas forced into pregnancy for profit. And a single anomaly, a pregnancy that didn't fit the pattern, a child conceived naturally, carried safely, protected at enormous cost. A child whose existence proved the system could be broken. The article didn't name names, didn't identify the omega or the alpha who'd fought to keep them safe, but the implication was clear. This child, Cade and Zaire's daughter, had been the proof they needed. Her existence had triggered an investigation that saved thousands. And Cade hadn't even known. Someone else had, someone who'd watched from the shadows, someone who'd weaponized the one thing Cade had tried to hide. "Who leaked this?" Cade asked. "Don't know, but boss," Terrence's voice was quiet. "If you'd gone public, if you'd claimed him openly, they would have killed the baby before she was born. The evidence wouldn't exist. Cauldron would still be operating." The words settled like stones in Cade's chest. He'd been right to hide, right to push Zaire away, right to become the villain. And he'd never know who'd used his greatest failure to achieve his only goal. 3 months later, Central Park was alive with autumn colors. Cade pushed a stroller along a path near the conservatory garden. The stroller was expensive but not flashy, the kind wealthy people bought when they wanted quality without attention. Inside, wrapped in a blanket Zaire had chosen, their daughter slept with tiny fists curled near her face. Zaire walked beside him, closer than before, not touching but present. Healing was slow. Trust grew back in increments, small moments, quiet conversations, apologies that couldn't fix everything but started the process. They'd left the penthouse, too many bad memories, too much blood cleaned from floors that still felt haunted. Now they lived in Brooklyn, brownstone, 3 floors, normal, or as normal as life could be when your child's birth coincided with the collapse of a criminal empire. "She has your stubborn streak," Zaire said. Cade smiled. "She has your survival instincts. Let's hope she doesn't need them." They walked in silence for a while, watched other families, other parents navigating strollers and toddlers and the chaos of ordinary life. No one looked at them twice. No one knew what they'd survived to get here. That was the point. Invisibility had saved them, secrets had protected them, and now they could exist without constantly looking over their shoulders. "Mostly. I got a letter yesterday," Zaire said quietly. Cade tensed. "From who?" "I don't know, no return address, just..." Zaire pulled a piece of paper from his jacket, handed it to Cade. The letter was typed, professional, brief. "Your daughter's existence changed laws in 14 states, forced congressional hearings, saved an estimated 3,000 omegas from exploitation. Most people will never know her name. That's exactly why it worked. Thank you for your sacrifice, both of you." No signature, no identification, just gratitude from someone who'd been watching the entire time. Cade folded the letter carefully, handed it back. "They're right, if anyone knew." "They'd target her, I know." Zaire tucked the letter away. "Doesn't make it easier." "No, it doesn't." They reached a bench, sat down, the stroller positioned between them. Their daughter stirred but didn't wake, just made soft sounds that meant she was dreaming about things Barbies dreamed about: warmth, safety, voices that loved her. "Do you regret it?" Zaire asked, "the way it happened?" Cade thought about that, about the months of avoidance, the pain he'd caused, the nights he'd spent watching Zaire from a distance, wanting nothing more than to close the gap but knowing it would end in disaster. "I regret hurting you," Cade said. "I don't regret keeping you alive." "That's not the same thing." "I know." Zaire leaned against him, shoulder to shoulder. The contact was light but intentional, progress. "For what it's worth," Zaire said, "I understand now. I don't like it, but I understand." That was more than Cade deserved, more than he'd hoped for. He took Zaire's hand, laced their fingers together, felt the warmth of skin against skin, simple, profound, real. She's going to ask questions someday, Zaire said, about how we met, about why we lived the way we did. We'll tell her the truth. Which truth? Cade looked at their daughter, at the tiny life they'd created and protected at enormous cost, at the proof that love didn't always look like softness. Sometimes it looked like absence, sometimes it looked like cruelty, sometimes it looked exactly like the opposite of what it was. That fear can look exactly like abandonment, Cade said quietly. That protection sometimes requires distance, that the hardest choices aren't between good and bad, they're between bad and worse. You think she'll understand? I think she'll know we tried, Cade paused. I think she'll know we chose her, every time. Zaire nodded, wiped his eyes quickly. Yeah, okay. They sat there until the sun started setting, watched the park empty, watched the city transform from day to night, watched their daughter wake up, look at them with eyes that didn't judge or question or understand, just accepted that these were the people who would always be there. Most people would never know this story existed. Most people would never know that sometimes justice didn't roar, it whispered, it worked in shadows, it protected by erasing itself. And sometimes the greatest act of love was becoming the villain in someone's story, just long enough to keep them alive. Cade never avoided Zaire again. Because looking at him no longer hurt. It healed. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, inspired you, or made you think about love and sacrifice differently, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us that strength sometimes looks like surrender. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. What would you have done in Cade's position? We'd love to know.